Hi, I'm Bob the Hollow. After the last episode, we're finally stepping out of ancient history, and we'll be able to talk about the stories that unfold in present-day Yharnam, including our own hunter's journey. Let's start by taking a look at the current state of this land, shall we? Yharnam is in disarray. With the leadership of the church solidified, the choir reigns unchallenged. They care little for the people as they fix their gaze toward the sky. Life in Yharnam is a never-ending cycle. Blood, foreigners, paranoia, blood, the night of the hunt. Reset, restart, blood. The chains on the surgical tables show that blood treatment is expected to yield harrowing results, time after time. An excess of carriages on the streets indicates that, despite their distrust of outsiders, it's that influx of outsiders that's been funding Yharnam's growth. But there's also an excess of luggage haphazardly thrown around. It all seems innocent enough at first glance, but startlingly peculiar. The imposing architecture, the looming dread creeping in from the night, that awful, harrowing cry. On the night of the hunt, we can clearly imagine the paranoid Yharnamites dragging the foreigner visitors out of their beds. Staking and burning, it's all your fault, they shriek, but their curses are overwhelmed by the screams of their victims and the stench of singeing blood. Coffins have already been laid out in preparation, reserved for the fair share of locals who have to be put down on every hunt. Many of the coffins have chains around them, in fear that the beasts will claw their way out of the ground. Reset, restart, blood. Central Yharnam and the Cathedral Ward were built as an extension of Old Yharnam, but their architecture is far more exquisite, borrowing cues from Cainhurst Castle, residency of their local lords. They were built while still under the domain of those lords, as depictions of the Queen can still be found in various places. The engravings and statues showcase some new designs mixed with old ones. The Griffin heraldry of Old Yharnam can be seen in certain parts, though, in some areas, the image itself shows different designs, a sign that their culture was slowly distancing itself from its roots. The griffin no longer figures prominently, and it's no longer present in places of worship, meaning a steady march out of the shadows of royalty and into the shadows of the Healing Church. This can also be seen in how their previous religion had changed. In the Church of the Good Chalice, in the Witch's Abode, we can find a sculpture of a woman apparently pleading at the skies in front of what seems to be a sick man. As stated before, Annalise's blood would have been used to treat the first stage of what would later become known as the Ashen Blood Sickness, after she reached the surface, and this sculpture is a representation of that fact. Annalise pleading to Odin and freeing the sick from their disease. The healing itself is represented by the afflicted breaking free from their bandages. There is also the chapel dedicated to Odin, connecting Yharnam to the Cathedral Ward, and beneath it, there's Odin's tomb. This representation of Odin is the same that can be found in Old Yharnam, a very stereotypical image of an imposing father figure looming over his supplicants. But under the influence of the Healing Church, his representation slowly changed, and he became a supplicant himself. It is a common practice, after all. You can conquer a nation with an army, but to conquer its people, one must assimilate their culture and bring them into the fold. The old beliefs were kept for the sake of easing the transition, but Odin's position would be replaced. Blood worship towers above all else. The Healing Church tolerates no competition. Prior to the outbreak of the Scourge and the rise of the Red Moon, Old Yharnam had its share of woes, afflicted with beasts and the Ashen Blood Sickness. But nothing was as dire as what can be seen today. There weren't tombstones on the streets, and coffins were stored inside discreet locations. The outbreak caught everyone by surprise. The powder kegs were on site, but no contingency plan could possibly have been devised. Their decision of burning the town to ashes was implemented without orders from above, out of desperation more than anything else, especially considering that, during the rise of the Red Moon, the upper echelons of the Healing Church would have more pressing matters to tend to. The powder kegs were beckoned by the moon presence, but eventually left their dreams behind and secluded themselves among the people they once knew, old friends in need of protection. They're all beasts now. That was the last time the Ashen Blood Sickness was ever heard of. The only item description that mentions this disease is the antidote, and if the disease had survived the cleansing of Old Yharnam, this item would have been predominant in Central Yharnam as well, but it isn't. Blood ministration couldn't have cured Ashen Blood Sickness though. The Scourge is a byproduct of this very same procedure, and since the outbreak of the Scourge was the very reason for burning Old Yharnam to the ground, then the inhabitants of Old Yharnam were already treated with blood. Therefore, we know blood cannot cure Ashen Blood Sickness. So, what changed? As discussed in the long-lived The Blood Queen video, we know that the Ashen Blood Sickness spread out of the Forbidden Woods through the food they provided to the surrounding settlements, contaminated by the soil of that land, which became corrupted by the poison rising from Laurence and the Hintertombs. But the woods were sealed off, which means the rest of the population was no longer exposed to contaminated food, and, on that account, the Ashen Blood Sickness was miraculously cured from the rest of Yharnam. But the general population knew nothing about that. They were content in their ignorance, not having to worry about the disease anymore, so the area was locked away and its people forgotten, never to be seen again. Henrik is currently inhabited by former denizens of the Labyrinth, blood ministers, and Yharnamites. It has been repurposed by the church into an organ harvesting facility. Here, the bodies are dismantled, the organs are extracted, and the bones are ground into bone marrow lash. The eye collectors are in charge here, descendants of the Tumerian Rite Keepers. They understand the value of the materials being collected, which will be used in labyrinth rites. Two of them, in particular, seem to be hoarding eyes to themselves. This isn't a safe place. You should turn back. Not even hunters are immune to their grasp. You might end up tortured and killed, or maybe, even worse. The Mad Ones are known to drop beast hunter gems. Is this the fate of the hunters who have fallen in this place? Ever since the fall of Cainhurst and the rise of Bergenworth, the old woods had been cut off from the general population, but even after William's departure, the church still had access to it. Now, even members of the church are forbidden to enter those woods, with the exception of a select few, of course. Here, you can find the white church set, beast blood pellets, blue elixirs, poison knives, and even a hand cannon that was mistranslated as being a powder keg invention but was actually a church prototype. We can even find a few small emissaries, envoys of the ruling choir, trapped beneath the madness, all of which implies the presence of the church. These woods were also home to the Madara's twins, who became butchers and hunters, but they weren't the only ones. This section of the world isn't normally open. It isn't a place anyone can simply wander into. It is, in fact, a very important little corner, despite its unassuming looks. It is the base of the tower connecting the hunter's workshop, the church workshop, and the upper cathedral ward. It is also functionally a means of bypassing the main gate to Round Plaza, which only opened at the end of the hunt, letting church personnel in and out of the cathedral ward before the night was over. These butchers didn't stumble their way from the woods into this place. They were there with the consent of the church. And this area also has a beast-possessed soul. We'll come back to him later. For now, it is only important to acknowledge the connection between the church and those woods. There, the White Garb doctors were conducting church-backed experiments in the Forbidden Woods village. Their clothes even boast the highest slow poison resistance in the game, as they would be dealing with snakes, and the very ground there can be poisonous at certain places. Ever wonder where the poison of the poison knives comes from? Some of these experiments can still be found wandering the lower part of the woods. husks of men implanted with snake balls. They can summon more snakes through whistles, just like the Madara's brothers did. But the night of the hunt was different this time. Too many people turned into beasts, and the relatively small group of church personnel was easily overwhelmed. Beasts all over the shop. Yahar'gul has been sealed off by a mysterious ritual, and even the church knows very little about its current state. Once upon a time, Yahar'gul hunters brought their kidnapped victims here with the assistance of domesticated snatchers, but whichever of these hunters were out of the village during the Red Moon ritual, they were locked outside too. A couple of them wait near its doors. A few others are scattered around. We don't meet these three until they take the opportunity to sneak into the village after we've broken the ritual that kept it sealed. All is death inside these halls. The dead Yahar'gul hunter, still sitting on top of his carriage, demonstrates that, whatever happened here on that night, the ritual went bad for everyone. The hunters can't get in, but the snatchers apparently can, through the hole that has been dug, connecting the village to old Yharnam. Antal, a Yahar'gul hunter, can be summoned outside the hole, and since Antal is a defector, it stands to reason that the other Yahar'gul hunters wouldn't know about this secret exit. These snatchers, with their deteriorated brains, continue mindlessly capturing anything they can find, just as mindless as the church servants and giants. All is death inside these halls. Once the game begins, we are greeted by a cutscene with a blood minister's dialogue. We are currently inside Yosefka's clinic, waiting for our blood ministration and the signing of a contract. It's a common misconception that this is our hunter's contract. You walk into a clinic anywhere and ask for medical procedures, a form, or a contract. Some kind of paperwork would definitely be required. And that is exactly what this is. Standard protocol between a patient and the sanctioned practitioner working in a medical institution. Not that this contract isn't relevant to the lore, because it is, but we'll get back to it later on. First, we have to talk about our actual hunter's contract, which is presented during the second half of this cutscene. Here, at the beginning of the nightmare, blood allows the discovery of the beast residing deep within our hearts. It beckons us with a gentle, almost pleading gesture. We manage to refuse his alluring invitation, but at this point, our eyes have already been opened to the nightmare soul. The beast may not have claimed us today, but the moon presence most certainly will. But you're not the only one ever to have made such an arrangement, are you? During our time in Yharnam, we'll meet with other hunters, and I'd like to talk about them for a bit. Some will be only briefly mentioned, as I may not have anything to say about them that hasn't been said before. while others warrant a more expanded explanation. Starting with Gehrman, the first hunter, and his companion, the plain doll. About Gehrman himself, I'd like to mention that he seems completely cut off from the world outside the hunter's dream. The first pieces of evidence come from himself. In his sleep, he can be heard talking about Laurence, saying that he's taking too long. It may be just a dream, but it sure sounds like he doesn't know Laurence is dead. He also tells you to ascend to Oldham Chapel in order to receive help from the Healing Church workshop, and he clearly wouldn't have said that if he knew about the workshop's current state. The other piece of evidence comes from the doll's dialogue when she talks about Gehrman for the first time. She says that he is unseen in the dreaming world, but the Japanese dialogue simply says that he cannot see form. I'm using the word form in this translation for lack of a more fitting English counterpart, and also because the kanji used in this dialogue is the same kanji used to describe Oldham as being formless or without form. And I'd like to raise a question about the doll's origin as well. Her craftsmanship always struck me as too delicate for Gehrman's work, both with the body and the clothing that she wears. But then I noticed that Nikolash's skeletons are literal puppets, dolls on a string. Did he create the doll? Did he offer it to Gehrman in exchange for the umbilical cord that he would later use? Alfred is a good exposition dump for popular beliefs and misconceptions. His hearsay information would never be accepted in a court of law. Also, he is not necessarily a protege of Logarius, as the word would imply they knew each other. The Japanese dialogue only says that he follows Logarius' teachings, and he's blood drunk. With all that being said, it's safe to say that whatever information he may dispense is completely unreliable. He does present a very good example of what the executioner's heady fanaticism would have looked like, though, of what their relationship between the Healing Church and their followers is actually like. The Church dictates the truth and the followers believe it, no questions asked. This is reflected not only in their helmet that looks like it obfuscates vision, but also in Logarius' words. In English, it already has the meaning of doing good even if it isn't always wise, but in Japanese it takes it a step further, very blatantly saying that good and evil and wise and foolish have nothing to do with each other, so we only have to be good. Why be wise when you can be good, right? And the rest of the Yharnamites aren't too far behind in their fanaticism either. Regarding Gascoigne and Henrik, just a quick correction on translations. It is said that the taciturn old hunter Henrik was once partners with Father Gascoigne, and though they were a fierce and gallant duo, the partnership led to Henrik's tragically long life. There's actually no mention of a fierce and gallant duo, and about his long life, it is only stated that because he was strong, he could not find a place to die as a hunter. And Djura is just a very broken, old man filled with regrets. Just leave him be, will ya? Brador, the hunter, was believed to have killed Laurence when Laurence became the bloodletting beast. But there's a problem with the bloodletting beast portion of this theory. There are two instances of this boss inside the Tumerian labyrinth, the regular one at depth 3 and the headless version at depth 5. Most people assume it is a natural progression. He has a head and then he doesn't. The problem is, as shown in my Tomb of the Gods video, that the lower depths of the labyrinth represent an older point in time, meaning that the headless version precedes the regular one, and that can only be explained if they were two distinct entities. Just like every other kind of beast in the game, two separate examples of a similar breed. The bloodletting beast may have been an enticing prospect at one point, but there's really no reason to believe that it was Laurence. especially considering that Laurence is represented as a regular cleric beast inside the nightmare, a burning one, but a cleric beast nonetheless. There is also no reason to believe that either his breed or his burning body are symbolic, as many things are inside the nightmare. There is, above his altar, the statue of a woman pouring water in his skull. Why would they place a statue dousing him with water if he wasn't, at some point, literally set on fire? But we've seen such a beast before, and know that it isn't an ever-burning fiend filled with molten lava, so the reason for him to still be burning can be interpreted through symbology though. It is a sign of his regret, the cleansing of the impurity that led to his demise and the deviations that followed in the wake of his decisions. A sign shared by Brador. The church assassin killed his friend, then secluded himself. The seclusion indicates either shame, remorse, or both, and considering that insight is spent when ringing special bells, then it can be speculated that he keeps ringing his bell in hopes that, by spending his insight, that is, his knowledge, he may forget his transgression, which is also a convenient way for the church to hide the truth about the vicar's demise. The surgery altar, located just above Brador's cell, seems to tell the story of Laurence's death. The altar has two stages stacked on top of each other, and, as I've mentioned before, in the Hunter's Nightmare, space equals time. As you're making your way upwards, you're moving further into the past, from the cathedral to the research hall, and from there to the fishing village. Following this framework, the upper part of the surgery altar is the beginning, and the bottom is the end. We see, first, the ritual led by Willan, and the patient would be Laurence himself, since this is the location where his remains can be found both in and out of the nightmare. The ritual led to the beast lurking beneath the patient, symbolizing Laurence's transformation. This, in turn, led to his death, surmised by the presence of his skull on the level beneath the depiction of the ritual. And finally, at the bottom, there's the church canon. I've mentioned before that they would have used blue elixirs to domesticate church giants and servants, and that notion stems from the elixir's description, stating that it numbs the brain, in association with the church canon, which was designed to be used by men with deteriorated brains. Remember that the giants of the Hunter's Nightmare wield such weapons and that the church servants drop blue elixirs. The final sentence of Laurence's dirge shows the direction the church would head into in the absence of Laurence's leadership, which is also exemplified by the altered version of the Fear the Old Blood adage that is being recited by the vicar praying in front of the altar.
Blood satiates us, soothes our fears. Seek the old blood. But beware, the frailty of men. Their wills are weak, minds young.
And beneath all that is Brador. He was a friend to Laurence. He was present during what was supposed to have been his friend's moment of glory. But the glory of that moment gave way to horror, as Laurence transformed into a grotesque, menacing creature. Brador put Laurence down, a mercy killing of sorts. He's still waiting, not too far from his old friend, still trying to forget, still ringing his bell. And Brador's role made me consider that he may have been the first hunter of hunters. His garb is similar to Eileen's. To say Brador used blood techniques during his fight is quite the understatement. He's from Cainhurst. Being from Cainhurst, he's not a proper Yharnamite, he's an outsider of sorts. And he did kill out of mercy. So far, so good, but the part that threw me off this idea, at first, was the mention of sky burials. a ritual where the body of the deceased is laid out in the open, or, sometimes, on a tower called a Tower of Silence, to be consumed by vultures and the remaining parts fed to crows. In this manner, the deceased is providing for nature, an act of generosity towards all beings that is an important virtue in Buddhism. In some interpretations, this is also meant to help their spirit reunite with the skies. Its description fits the in-game description pretty well, with the added quirk of the final rest's destination being the hunter's dream. The problem is that there is no mention that Cainhurst would partake in such practice. But then again, there is no mention that they didn't. There's also no cemetery where they'd have buried their dead in Cainhurst, or, at least, none that we can see. And then there's Murgle, on top of that tower. The wet nurse reminds us of Eileen only, instead of a crow, she's shaped like a vulture instead. She swoops in and takes Murgle's supposed body, just like a vulture consuming a body on the Tower of Silence. A comparison that is made that much more fitting when surrounded by so many dead corpses. The sky burial couldn't have been a Tumerian custom since they lived underground, but, judging by her garb, Murgle's wet nurse has taken the appearance of a human wet nurse. Murgle's baby cart is also a human object. This entire setting isn't taking inspirations from Tumeru, it's taking inspirations from us. But where, exactly, are these inspirations coming from? Annalise, ruler of Cainhurst, was once betrothed to Odin. Could they be taking these inspirations from Cainhurst? Could sky burial have been a Cainhurst custom? Could they have fed their dead to the lost children of antiquity, for instance? One last note about hunters. The correlation between insight and frenzy is already widely known. The lower your insight, the higher your frenzy resistance. We can then take a character's attire as an indicator of their owner's insight. The higher the frenzy resistance, the lower that character's insight. Therefore, members of the church would have very high insight, while hunters in general are... how can I put this? Well, they're quite ignorant, to be honest. Besides the hunters, there are also a number of other characters you might encounter during your journey, and I'd like to disclose my thoughts on some of them. First, I'd like to mention a connection that binds many of them, whether they know it or not. Despite the Yharnamites' popular belief, not all denizens of Cainhurst were killed in the massacre. Their cultural heritage may have been erased, but their descendants are still around. As I have shown on my last video, the choir itself is comprised of the orphans of the massacre, and they are not the only ones whose lineage can be traced back to the Forgotten Castle. The ones we get to meet are Ariana, Impostor Josefka, the Old Chapel Dweller, and Gascoigne's daughters. And, just to be clear, I don't think Gascoigne is a Cainhurst descendant. I think his wife Viola was. Ariana's descendance is made clear by the description of the third umbilical cord that can be acquired from her, stating that it was corrupted blood that started the liaison with Odin. Impostor Josefka's lineage is also easy to piece together, as she'd enter labor during the rise of the Red Moon, and a cord of the eye can also be acquired from her, just like Ariana. Not only that, but she also drops the Odin Rife rune, while the Odin Chapel Dweller drops the formless Odin rune, as does Gascoigne's younger daughter if you send her to Josefka's clinic. Adela also drops the Odin Rife rune, but she doesn't go into labor during the Red Moon, so, considering that she's a blood saint, I think the rune was used to allow her to become a vessel for blood of a higher grade. Another factor shared by all of these characters is the fact that they can...
oh my, what a queer scent.
smell you.
Ah, moonlit scents.
All of these characters...
You must be a hunter. very sorry. The incense must have masked your scent.
All of them apparently associated with Cainhurst and the Formless Great One.
Who are you? I don't know your voice, but I know that smell.
Mention your smell, and they are the only ones to do so, indicating that their special blood grants them enhanced senses. Another piece of information that can be surmised by this group's lineage is an answer to the question, why the hell does Gascoigne's music box play Murgo's lullaby? I think this tune was traditional in Cainhurst's culture. A few minutes ago, I mentioned how the wet nurse was taking inspiration from humans in order to set up Margot's nursing installation and procedures. That maybe she was taking inspirations from Cainhurst. Well, what about the lullaby? Where did that come from? The only thing the wet nurse and Gascoigne's daughter could possibly have in common is Cainhurst, so that has to be the place where the tune comes from, right? In order to expand upon the imposter, we'll have to go back to our first contract, as it answers two questions presented by the game. How does our character know about Pale Blood, and why is the Cainhurst summons addressed to us by name? The first question is answered by the different origins that can be chosen during character creation. They could all be somehow loosely associated with Yharnam's history if we tried really hard and used a lot of imagination. But that doesn't make for much of an argument, does it? Luckily, there are two in particular that make this point clear beyond any doubt and set the precedent for the others. Lone Survivor is a reference to the fishing hamlet. It could have been interpreted as a reference to Old Yharnam, since Gehrman calls it a hamlet, but they use different kanjis for both instances in Japanese, and the one used for the Lone Survivor origin is the same used to describe the fishing hamlet. And there's also Noble Scion, which, boasting a high blood change bonus, would be a reference to Cainhurst. They leave the details of our shared history open to interpretation, but make sure to point out that such history exists. Add to it the fact that Yharnam isn't a secret to the world at all, being the travel destination for people from far and wide who are seeking treatment for their illnesses, and even the occasional troop of constables chasing after a beast, undoubtedly some poor sod who had also received blood transfusion before, and the fact that past hunters can and do leave the drink behind without actually forgetting about the hunt. And you can see how knowledge of the word Pale Blood may not be so strange after all. And regarding the Cainhurst summons, people have told me that we must have brought it with us, and that Annalise must have sent for us by name, but I find that very unlikely. Not only I see no reason why she'd know us at all, she also doesn't have the means to send the summons, being trapped and alone inside a forgotten castle. Personally, I think the summons was brought by imposter Yosefka and that she's the one who wrote our names on it. She's not only a Cainhurst descendant, but she also happens to be a special church doctor, if her white shirt set is to be taken as evidence, and one could argue that she's taken the set from the real Yosefka, but judging by how she's able to turn people into small emissaries, and her use of Augur of Ebritas, I'd say she's definitely with the church. We could have a hint of Cainhurst lineage ourselves, if we had chosen the Noble Scion origin, but she stayed in Yharnam, and she's with the church, the institution that was responsible for the Cainhurst massacre itself. So I think it's a lot more likely that she'd have access to this item than our character, wouldn't you say? After taking over the clinic, she'd have found out our names from the contract we had signed before, and written that name on the summons, just like we did for Alfred. Realizing we were now able hunters, she thought about manipulating us into doing some, let's call it research, inside Cainhurst. Just like she tried to manipulate us into bringing patients for her. But we managed to get the summons by ourselves before she had the chance of slipping it under the door. She was already trying to manipulate us, and, after that point, she still thinks we would be willing to help her despite recent revelations. Another thing I would also like to point out is that she isn't working alone. We may never meet her other accomplices and prospect co-workers, but they're around. The imposter herself would have come from the Forbidden Woods, where white church doctors would have been conducting experiments, through the toxic lake that connects the woods to the clinic, and other church members would have come with her, as indicated by the continuing transformation of citizens into small celestial emissaries, even after the imposter's demise. Until the red moon rises, that is, since after that point, most people seem to go slightly unhinged. And the last Cainhurst descendant that I'd like to point out is Vicar Amelia. Amelia bears striking resemblance to Cainhurst nobility, with her pale skin and the color of her hair. She is also serving directly under the choir, who would be constituted of other Cainhurst descendants. She is a cleric, but once she turns, she doesn't turn into a cleric beast. At least, not like the one that can be found at the bridge or Laurence himself. As stated in the Long Live the Blood Queen video, Cainhurst beasts would be of a different sort, particular to their bloodline. This is further indicated by her coating of silver fur, similar to those of the Laurence silver beasts, whose land has been previously associated with Annalise. The horns, as well, they are very different from those of a regular cleric beast, and they remind me of the head trophies that I've mentioned before, the ones that can be found in Cainhurst Castle. Next, we'll be taking a look at another group of characters that are, at first glance, seemingly unrelated. Church-produced beasts. This group includes the Beggar, Gilbert, and the beast-possessed soul of Cathedral Ward. The most interesting character here is undoubtedly the Beggar, but the ruminating process only started when I was looking into the beast-possessed soul. Why is it there? Why does it drop the beast rune? And, more importantly, why is it there? I ask about the rune because runes aren't an ordinary drop. They are specific 100% chance drops of whoever drops them. They don't drop from regular mobs, and they also carry significant lore implications. For instance, if Willan dropped the moon rune instead of the eye, wouldn't that completely change our perception of the lore revolving around that character? Also, runes aren't an abstract thing. They didn't always exist, and they don't come into existence out of nowhere. They are pictographs devised by Carol to translate the utterings of the Great Ones, and you'd need a connection to either the Church, the Hunters, or Byrgenwerth to come across one of these. And it just so happens that this particular instance of this particular beast drops the, well, it drops the beast rune. It seems only natural at first, but, like I said, rune drops aren't ordinary, and neither is the placement of this otherwise labyrinth-exclusive beast inside the Cathedral Ward. There is another out-of-the-ordinary beast who drops this very same rune, the Beggar. Found in the Forbidden Woods, he bears the ability to not only transform into an abhorrent beast at will, but to also maintain rational thought and human speech while in that form. And just like the beast-possessed soul, the abhorrent beast is completely out of place in his current location, considering that this beast is originally from the labyrinth. So, at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that the church was conducting experiments in the Forbidden Woods, right? And the presence of the butchers in the same area as the beast-possessed soul serves as the connection between that beast and those woods as well. These are both byproducts of church experiments. In these woods, Some of the humans turn into beasts who stand alongside the other villagers, have small horns growing on them, as if they were in an early stage of transformation into a beast-possessed soul themselves. And there are two procedures that would have been used during these experiments. First, there's the Affirmation Runes. In order to use a rune, we must first retrieve the Rune Workshop tool from Henrik, which is currently under church control, since they were using one such tool to etch these runes in their victims. Not the exact same one, mind you, but one like it. Remember that they were also in possession of the Blood Gem Workshop tool, and that the old workshop is literally inside church grounds, granting them easy access to these tools. And the second procedure is, well, a bit circumstantial. I think they are the creators and main distributors of the beast blood pellets. They induce beasthood, which the church was clearly researching. They are given by the beggar, and their description plainly states that its origin is unknown. And the English description also omits one very telling sentence that says that the Healing Church denies all involvement. Isn't that press talk for, we have all the involvement and you know it, but you can't prove anything? And, after starting the scourge, they even shifted the blame for it onto the ash and blood sickness. Okay, so, with all this laid out, I turned my gaze to another rune-dropping beast, Gilbert. He drops the claw mark rune after his transformation. Why would he drop that? He doesn't seem connected to the church or the hunters or Bergenworth, but he does seem like a very inquisitive person. His help may not seem like much, but he's gathered his fair share of information about Yharnam. His only real connection seems to be his disease and the treatment he sought for it, blood transfusion. But Yharnamites are secretive and distrustful of outsiders. His inquiries wouldn't have been welcomed. They don't seem particularly picky when it comes to choosing victims for experimentations, and this nosy outsider was an easy pick. Maybe he would have turned anyway, but why pass the chance? Just brand him with the rune and let blood do the rest. I was always sad for him, but that just makes me mad. And since we're in the subject of runes, besides being individual pictographs, the order in which they are presented, I believe, seem to also have meaning. The lake runes are grouped in the middle, a bulwark separating Odin from all others, dividing those who would either embrace or reject the call of the beast. Humanity is represented by the beast rune, a stand-in for the beasthood that is so intrinsically connected with the essence of humanity and that lies dormant in our natural state. Then, we'd have Eye and Moon representing cause and flora respectively. The lake runes invite you to breach this bulwark in order to find deeper truths, and, after we've done so, the runes will tell us the story of the beast's embrace. The hare sees a deeper sentiment inside the worm of blood. Visceral attacks represent the dark side of the hunter, now seeking the respite of blood. This is the condition of what a hunter should be, to be the one that inherits the blood's will. Odin's Rife sees a deeper secret inside the worm of blood, the dark side of the hunter, now seeking the respite of blood. While the moon's essence lies with the dying wishes inside the blood, the formless Great One's essence lies with blood itself. Through blood, the hare once sought echoes, but now, this Odin's inadvertent worshipper only seeks for blood. The sentiment turns to euphoria. The hare finally finds what he was looking for. They embrace the beast and are then embraced by the formless Great One and are, therefore, bestowed a gift of evolution. Here, the gift was mistranslated as communion. You can use this word to form the Japanese word for the Catholic communion, but, on its own, it means the act of receiving a gift from a superior or the gift itself. According to the progression I've proposed, the gift of evolution is represented by the Metamorphosis runes, who also reflect this idea mechanically by increasing our basic stats, improving our bodies through health and stamina. And the means through which this gift is delivered is depicted both in the Communion runes description that plainly states it to be blood transfusions, and in this version of the rune's pictograph that is present in the Chief Hunter's emblem and on the gate to Round Plaza. Here, the light symbolizes the gift being poured for the worshipper's end, since it is bestowed through blood ministrations, then it is being poured through the medium of blood. And this particular depiction is also interesting because it is a bridge that connects the Communion rune to this symbol, which is shared by both Cainhurst and Tumiru, further cementing the idea that Cainhurst would have backed Willan during the creation of the Healing Church. Now, bear in mind that, even though the inspiration for the runes comes from the Great Ones, the runes themselves are transcribed and written by human hands, and these hands can choose to write them in any form. This is evidenced by the different designs of the Hunter rune that can be found throughout the game, and also in the Covenant runes. There is some confusion regarding these runes that stems from the Rune Workshop tool's description that says Provost Willan would have been proud of Carrio's runes, as they do not rely on blood in any measure. In English, this description states that the runes don't rely on blood, but in Japanese, it says that the tool doesn't rely on blood. So, the blood seen in these pictures is still consistent with that description. And it's really not that strange that they'd have used blood on these particular runes, since, besides Byrgenwerth, they all deal with blood in one way or another, and these runes have also taken on another meaning, apart from their original transcription, representing particular groups and ideologies. They seem to take pride on it. Valtr, for one, seems quite excited about it. With this in mind, it's easy to see why these runes were given a little bit more flair than the others and why a couple of them were distinctively personalized. These two groups meant to set themselves apart from the others. The Milkweed rune has taken on a more arcane hue, most commonly associated with the choir in their inquiries into the cosmos, while the Radiance rune has taken on a more radiant appearance. The Executioner Zealots, with their heady fanaticism, saw themselves as the light that opposed corruption. This notion was so entrenched in their ideology that they wore the rune on their heads. And the triangular shape of the rune reminds me of the Communion rune's shape. If the light on that rune, and all others for that matter, is meant to symbolize the Great One's gift of evolution, then the radiant aspect of their creed is a reflection not only of their perceived purity, but also of the effects derived from the heavy blood usage that would have enhanced their bodies to the detriment of their minds, granting them uncanny prowess, enough to overthrow Cainhurst, but also leading to their fanatical, violent behavior, and that would, someday, demand its toll from Ludwig, the first church hunter. And the depiction of this gift being poured into a vessel in the Communion rune can also be associated with the iconography of Laurence's altar. Despite his gruesome end, his transformation would have been seen as another step towards the goal of evolution through blood. So this statue would take on a twofold symbolism, with the divine both dousing the flames that killed Laurence, but at the same time pouring the insight that led to his evolution directly into his head, a mirror to the process that led to his beastly end. And when all is said and done, I think that the most meaningful contribution these underappreciated items have given us is tangible proof regarding the concept of evolution through insight. The whispers of a great one, they will grant you eyes. Before a hunter reaches the end of its journey, there are a few final observations that I'd like to make. It is usually assumed that the congregation around Micolash and Advent Plaza, in preceding the Wet Nurse, are comprised by the members of the School of Menses, whose minds would have been fused with Micolash's during the ritual, thus usage of we and us. But Micolash is the only one wearing the student uniform that is associated with that institution, and the ragged band of people that comprise these congregations even count children among its ranks. This casts a great shadow of doubt over that common assumption about Micolash playing host for the rest of the School of Menses, especially considering that the pronoun he uses in Japanese can be used as both first person plural and first person singular. And even if it was meant to be plural, considering the lack of Menses corpses, that would be more figurative than literal. He would simply be speaking for the institution he represents. And people have quoted his title as a host of the nightmare in the sense that I've used just now, in the parasitic sense, but that word, in Japanese, simply doesn't have that meaning. It can be translated as host, but only with the meaning of entertaining guests. I know it's hard to let go of our preconceptions, but look at it objectively. This idea that Micolash would be host to the minds of the members of the School of Menses stems from the mummified people around him, his title, and his dialogue in plural form. But the first isn't true, the second is misleading, and the last one is inconclusive. Not only that, but there really aren't any other members around. At this point, there's really no reason to believe it anymore. Maybe they died in Advent Plaza. Maybe they scattered and faded away. Maybe they were hunted by the choir. Whatever happened to them, I don't think they're inside Micolash's head. And since we've mentioned Advent Plaza, we can find here another very common misconception, that being that the bell-ringing ladies that appear after the rise of the Red Moon would have been working with Menses. But after they appear, all snatchers are killed. All eye collectors are also gone and presumed dead, since they don't really leave corpses behind when they die. So I think it's pretty clear they're just not working with anyone, really. They killed all Yahar'gul personnel and are trying very, very hard to kill us too. And we can use this information to address yet another misconception. It is believed that church giants are dead Temerians that have been resurrected, drawing a comparison to the actual undead giants that can be found inside the labyrinth, but the church never showed the necessary prowess to do such a thing. Advent Plaza would have been the only instance where bodies are brought back to life and reshaped into twisted forms, but, as I have shown just now, the people responsible for this feat are not working with the church. In fact, a much closer and relevant comparison should be made to the giants that can be found in the Toxic Lake area connecting the Forbidden Woods to central Yharnam. These giants are undoubtedly associated with the church, considering their garb and the bells around their necks, and, unlike their undead labyrinthine counterparts, these giants don't have their insides on the outside. They weren't revived, they were just brainwashed. A very inconsequential fact that I am personally very fond of. It is no secret that the messengers worship the hunters. The doll plainly states as much, but they are like children, blissfully ignorant about the worlds they inhabit. They wear adornments without understanding their purpose, and can't even tell which end of a gun goes boom. Except for the Beth messengers of the inside shop, these ones seem so completely unimpressed by our presence. And that's because, well, they have insight. Such a small detail, but it gives all messengers so much more character. All of these people, all of their stories, they all take place in Yharnam. It is assumed that they all take place in the waking world, but on the night of the hunt, it's just not so. After our blood transfusion, after our first glimpse into the world beyond, we awaken to the nightmare of blood and beasts. This is a nightmare in the sense we have come to expect from this game. This is not the waking world. The first clue to this conclusion comes from the fact that time doesn't move during the hunt, at least not in the way you'd expect from it. From beginning to end of the game, the clock in central Yharnam points to the same moment in time. Judging by its architecture, it's believed that Yharnam is located somewhere in the region of the Czech Republic. The Astral Clock Tower, for instance, is more than heavily inspired by Prague's astronomical clock. As such, this clock measures time in Bohemian hours. It is now shortly before 1 o'clock, shortly before sunset. The moon will soon rise, and time will stand still. Time itself a hostage to the nightmare. Every time you awaken, time will restart, and the world will reset. It will only be allowed to move forward once certain events have come to pass. And this version of Yharnam may not be as symbolic as the one found in the Hunter's Nightmare, but, nonetheless, the drying of the aqueducts, overseen by the bulwark-breaching messengers, is figurative of the weakening barrier between worlds and, on a night of the hunt, the two planes meet in an eldritch liaison. All Yharnamites have already been exposed to the essence of the Dreamlands through their heavy usage of blood, and on these special nights they are dragged into this mimicry version of Yharnam. A place where the unseen can be seen, a place where communion is possible, a place where old Yharnam still burns. The moon is intrinsically connected to this liaison, as other characters predict the night will be long based on the moon's proximity. The Astral Clock Tower, in turn, would be used to trace the movement of the cosmos, allowing them to predict the arrival of the hunt. In part, to prepare for the insurgence of beasts, yes, but also to facilitate communion by taking advantage of the proximity to higher planes. This effect is amplified during the Red Moon ritual, when the waking and dreaming worlds are closer than ever. That facilitates contact with the beast within, which culminated in the scourge outbreak of old Yharnam and Laurence becoming a cleric beast. It allows Kenhur's descendants to be impregnated with the offspring of the Great Ones, and it also allows those who possess a Cord of the Eye to make full use of the insight borrowed from it, either by making contact with the Great Ones, or, in one very specific case, by becoming a Great One yourself. To be one step closer to a higher plane of existence, to grasp the dream of evolution with your own two hands. This is why Laurence beckoned the Red Moon. Evolution without courage will be our downfall. But on that fateful night, all of their dreams drowned under the moonlit sky. The sky is scorched by pale blood colors as the red moon hangs in the sky, watching over the hunt, waiting for the hunt's end. You sleep, you dream, you awaken. You fight, you hunt, you die. Reset, restart, blood. Face down on the mud, covered in blood. This too is hunter's work. We drag ourselves through the mud and the blood, in 1,000 corpses of 1,000 slain beasts, and we attain the ultimate prize, the end of the hunt. Fire will cleanse the workshop, and Gehrman will present you with a choice between sacrificing evolution or of evolving through sacrifice. A choice once reserved for the gods of old, but tonight you get to choose. Tonight you get to judge your own fate The fate of mankind. Good hunter, what is your choice? To be trapped inside a nightmare, forever hunting, forever drunk, without even knowing why. To escape this dreadful hunter's dream, halt the source of the spreading scourge of the beasts, lest the night carry on forever. On any other night, putting down enough beasts would suffice, but this night is different. This time, the moon is close. It will be a long hunt tonight. It is unreasonable to think that every hunter who ever left the dream has killed the wet nurse and liberated Murgle. The first time the red moon was seen over Yharnam's sky, the ritual was contained by Rom. The Vak was Great One, and the ritual were kept where Odin could not reach them. The formless Great One was denied his prize, but with Rom dead and the ritual unleashed, Odin would have a second chance, only to be denied a second time. By a hunter, nonetheless, and for this transgression, the hunter would be cursed. Every time you start a new game plus, you're not witnessing a different character living in a different world. Our character persists through all the playthroughs. When we surrender ourselves to Gehrman, our tombstone is placed in the hunter's dream, and you can see it when you awaken on your next hunt. All other characters will apparently relive the same night with us, but they are oblivious to the cyclic nature of this existence. They will go on about their businesses. They will repeat the same lines of dialogue without our interference. Nothing will ever change for them. They are blissfully unaware, mere props in this cursed play that has become our lives. But the good hunter does not share their luck. The good hunter will sleep, and dream, and awaken, and fight, and hunt, and die, trying to stop the nightmare over and over again. And on every hunt's end, the good hunter will choose, hoping to be chosen for the last time. But it doesn't matter what you choose. Every time you finish the hunt, you do not get to choose your fate. Your fate has been chosen for you. Alright, we finished another episode. We'll be talking about the Great Ones next. Thank you very much for watching. A very big thanks to my supporters at Patreon, Vinny and John in particular. Until next time, see ya.